just invite you to open up to Luke chapter 5 is where we're going to be today. Luke chapter 5. If you brought a paper Bible with you, who brought a paper Bible today? All right, we're getting there, man. It's really good. It's okay. We're not trying to shame you if you're on a device. That's okay. This isn't public shaming time. It's a little shaming, but that's okay. But if you brought a paper Bible, that's great. Awesome. Luke chapter 5 is where we're going to be. So if you're new here today, we are continuing on in a sermon series that we started on Easter of last year. So we've been at this thing for a while, and it's been really cool and fulfilling to make our way through the Gospel of Luke, investigating the claims of Jesus, looking at his life and his ministry, the things that he said, the things that he did, and really coming to the conclusion, is Jesus exactly who he claims to be? Can we trust Jesus? Can we look upon Jesus and think, this is someone who I can give my life to, I can place my trust in? And so that's been part of this journey for us, is really exploring the life and ministry and testimony of Jesus, coming to a place where we have to wrestle to the ground the most important question in all of human history, which is, did Jesus resurrect from the dead? No other question matters except that one. No other question. If Jesus didn't resurrect from the dead, then this is a book of fairy tales. It's hopelessness. It's a book of rules. But if Jesus resurrected from the dead, that changes everything, doesn't it? Changes everything. And so it's been really cool to kind of journey together through the Gospel of Luke to come to this place of discernment, discovery in our lives. And so we're going to pick up on in our journey, Luke chapter 5. We're looking at verses 27 through 32 is where we're going to camp out today. You might have a subtitle in your Bible. It says The Call of Levi. And so if you're using a device, we use the Christian Standard Bible here at Redemption, CSB. That might make it a little easier for you to follow along. So we'll pick up verse 27 through 32, and we'll read along here together. It says, after this, Jesus went out and he saw a tax collector named Levi sitting at the tax office, and he said to him, follow me. That's really, really important, gang. Verse 28, so leaving everything behind, he got up and began to follow him. And when Levi, then he hosted a grand banquet for him, for Jesus, at his house. Now, there was a large crowd, a large gathering of tax collectors and others who were guests with them. Verse 30, but the Pharisees and their scribes were complaining to his disciples. I know it's unusual to see a group of religious leaders complaining about something. But they were complaining to the disciples and saying, why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners? Verse 31, Jesus replied to them, it is not those who are healthy who need a doctor, but those who are sick. I've not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. I want to give you a little bit of background for this to make sense today. Jesus is still in Capernaum. He's doing ministry, he's teaching, going to neighborhood, section by section, establishing the kingdom of heaven here on earth. And Jesus is just going about his ministry in an area of Galilee that he's well known and that he has some credibility in. And so his ministry, if you remember, has recently taken some pretty significant shifts, some turning points, right up when he healed the paralyzed man. We talked about that last week. And as we studied, this brought about some really important turning points for Jesus. Number one was this, that Jesus now used the phrase Son of Man to describe himself. That's the first time we see that in the Gospel of Luke. That's a big deal. Secondly, we see that now Jesus claims he has the authority to forgive sins. That he has the authority to forgive sins. And so this shift, now coupled with this confrontation that Jesus has with the religious leaders, has placed a new spotlight on Jesus. So I really want you to insert yourself into the cultural moment of the day. I want you to see what Jesus is experiencing, what this neighborhood, what this community is experiencing. What's important here is to keep in mind that Capernaum it's a thriving community. It's a port community, but it's relatively small. So it's not like you can just kind of fade into oblivion or obscurity and avoid people. And so Jesus is really living in the thick of the last event as he's continuing his ministry and in light of it. Does that make sense so far? Jesus just healed a paralyzed man. If you need to go back and listen to that one from last week, that might be helpful to you. And so here's what we know according to the Gospel of Mark. That Jesus is in Capernaum. He's teaching and he's preaching along the lakeshore. Jesus likes the lakeshore. I think that's why I like the beach so much. It must just be a spiritual thing. Anybody else meet Jesus on a beach? You know what I'm saying? That sounds pretty good today, doesn't it? That sounds pretty good today. And we know that when he is finished teaching along the lakeshore, Jesus walks over to a small tax office along the side of the road, and sitting inside is a despised man, a man named Levi, whom I'm convinced has seen Jesus several times. He's been in the crowd, he's heard Jesus teach, and he looks upon him. Jesus looks upon this man, Levi, and he says, hey, I want you to follow me. I want you to follow me. And so seemingly, Luke, he gives us this kind of simple recap of the situation of what Jesus is doing and what Levi's doing and how Jesus approaches him. And if you look at verse 27, it's just a really simple recap. It says, after this, Jesus went out, saw a tax collector named Levi sitting at a tax office, and he said to him, follow me. Now, that's just way too simple to just leave it at that. I got to dive in. I got to know. There has to be more to the story than this, right? And so here's the reality. It's a simple statement, but it's loaded with a lot of really, really important details for us this morning. So I would even encourage you, as you're following along, to take some notes as the Lord might lead. So here's a couple things that are really interesting about this situation, some important details. Number one is that Luke notes that Levi is a tax collector. And so Luke is really good at providing us some key details. Luke doesn't know why that's ever going to matter to us as the future reader, but he's really good at giving us important details, and I'm so thankful for that, right? But it does matter. It absolutely matters that Levi is a tax collector. He didn't say he just saw a man named Levi watching and listening and goes over and he says, no, Levi was a tax collector. So for those of us that might be unfamiliar with first century Judaism, it's important to note that Jews during this time were occupied by what governing force? Anybody know? Say it louder. They're occupied by Rome. Rome did a few things really well during their time as an empire. Number one is they knew how to exercise force. They invented new ways of torturing people. And number two, they knew how to make money. They were really good at making money. This is critical for us. So Rome's method of collecting taxes, this is brilliant. It was to employ as tax collectors local people. So why would you pick local people to collect taxes for your government? It's simple, because local people have a way of knowing who's rich and who's not and where the money is. And so you employ local people. And so the way this would work is a province was divided into tax districts. And so locals would bid for the contract of collecting taxes in a district, okay? They would bid on it, and the bid was the money that they were contracted to pay the government. So whatever they collected over that amount was theirs to keep. So if I said, I want to collect taxes over this particular province of Belleville, then I would say, here's how much I will charge for taxes for Rome. And they would have people compete. So Rome didn't have to tell you, we want X percent or this amount. They just knew that if given the opportunity, people would compete amongst themselves to tax their own people for the nation of Rome. It's brilliant. It's truly brilliant. And so anything they taxed above that amount was theirs to keep. That's how they made money. So if they said, hey, I think Belleville can bring in 3% for you, but I'm going to charge 5%, so I can keep 2% for myself, right? Now, this is the other cool part. There was also a thing called a chief tax collector, chief dirtbag, right, of the community. Zacchaeus was a chief dirtbag, right? In Luke 19:2, he owned the contract for this region. This was Zacchaeus' job. And then he would employ other people to collect taxes from various villages. And so tax collectors were widely regarded as thieves and robbers. Thieves and robbers. This is the context. Rome collected three principal kinds of taxes. Number one was a land tax. We can all understand that. Number two was a head tax, based on how many people are in your home. And number three was a customs tax of anywhere from 2 to 5% of value of goods being transported. So at any point in time, they could stop and say, hey, I want to assess what you're transporting here. And they would look upon the goods in your transport, your convoy, and they would say, I'm going to charge you a 4% transportation tax as a customs tax on this. I mean, these people were taxed to death, right? Somebody's like, amen, you know what I'm saying? It was a lot. And so a tax office or a tax booth would be located near a city gate or a port to collect tax, such as fishermen exporting dried fish or farmers exporting surplus crops to a larger city. And so bottom line, gang, this is what you need to know about first century tax collectors. They were absolutely hated. They were hated. They were considered traitors. Because it wasn't Rome bringing in their officials, and so the whole community can go, oh, no, we hate this guy. Rome said, no, we're not doing that. We're going to hire somebody there because somebody there is greedy enough. Somebody there is greedy enough for that job. And they were right every time. Every time. This was Levi. This is our boy Levi right here, where he's sitting in his tax booth, overlooking a port, doing his job. And on this particular day, Levi is sitting in his office. He's near that port. He's doing his job. He's extorting his very own people, and things are about to change for Levi in a very dramatic way. So Jesus knows all of this. You understand this, right? What have I told you up to this point? That everything Jesus does is what? It's strategic. Everybody say strategic. Strategery, right? Yeah, we got close on that one. Yes. Everything Jesus does is strategic. He knows everything there is to know about this cultural moment. And yet, in spite of it, Jesus goes to Levi and issues a life-altering invitation to him. He says, "Follow me." This is another really important detail from Luke. Because see, when Jesus says, "Follow me," he's asking Levi to literally come after him, to walk the same road that he is walking. The Greek word here is a word that couples two thoughts together. It's a really powerful word. And so when we use that idea of like following Jesus, it's so much more than just a religious or emotional moment. See, Jesus is literally saying, come after me, follow me on the same road that I go, which means to accompany Jesus. So when Jesus says, I want you to follow me, he's not saying, I just want you to figure out what I'm teaching and just maybe apply that to your life in some sort of kitschy fashion. No, Jesus says, I want you to journey with me, to go along with me. That Jesus is inviting people, he's inviting Levi on a very specific journey. And that is a powerful thought. It's a powerful thought. But it goes deeper than that. You see, in Jewish culture, it was also understood that this meant discipleship. That this was a conversation around discipleship. So Jesus was inviting Levi not to just join him on some road trip. Hey, you want to get out of here, man? Go see the world a little bit? No, Jesus is saying, I want you to follow after me in a very particular way. I want you to be my disciple. I want you to be my pupil. I want you to be my Talmud. I want you to follow me. So here's Levi, a hated, despised tax collector standing before a rabbi who's inviting him to join him. And I want you to see how Levi responds. Look at verse 28 together. So leaving everything behind, he got up and began to follow him. Luke is really good at the details, isn't he? Isn't he really good at the details? Leaving everything behind. What did he leave behind exactly? What's Levi really compromising here? Well, he's losing his career, which is extremely lucrative for him. He's losing all of his wealth in doing so, and his power. He's losing his power. Tax collectors were hated, but they were untouchable. Why? Because they collected money for the Roman Empire. Have you ever sassed-mouthed an IRS agent? No. Kara says, yes. And that's why Karis went to jail. Sorry, cat's out of the bag. Yeah. No, it's this idea, right, that these people have such authority, they have such power, they have power over your life. A tax collector in this era had absolute power to end you, take everything from you. And the Roman Empire to back it up. What a frightening set of circumstances to find yourself, and that comes with tremendous power. And so Levi's losing his career, his wealth, and his power to follow Jesus. And he doesn't say, Can I think about it? I want to call some friends. No, it says immediately. He left everything. Left everything. Why? What would possess a person to do that? Because all of us in here, if somebody came to you and said, hey, I really want to go on the mission field. I feel like God's calling me on the mission field. And so I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to sell my house. I'm going to raise support. I'm going to go. There might be a small percentage of us that'd be like, okay, cool. But deep down inside, we're all like, are you sure? Have you really thought about this? Do you have a plan? Do you have what are you going to do? What happens if it doesn't? We're always planning for the contingency of something not working out, right? Failure is always the option. It's never, that's crazy. Hey, that's awesome. Good for you. I mean, think about this. What would cause a person to do this? And this is why I think Levi was willing to leave everything. It's because Jesus accepted him and showed him love. Jesus accepted him and showed him love. Levi was the most unloved man in Capernaum. Think about that for just a moment. Levi was the most unloved man in the entire region. And yet Levi's life was transformed in an instant. And never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined a day like this ever coming to pass. It's a chance at a fresh start. It's an adventure that didn't begin each day with people hating him. It was a rabbi that chose him. Jesus chose Levi, and by doing so gave Levi a new life. And so this makes sense when we recognize not only the decision to leave everything to follow Jesus, but by what he does next. What Levi does next is really, really exciting. Verse 29, it says, then Levi, if that wasn't enough, then Levi hosted a grand banquet for him at his house. And now there was a large crowd of tax collectors and others who were guests with him. So Levi invites Jesus to his house, going to throw him a massive party. It's a big deal, and obviously a good portion of that is out of gratitude. He's thankful for what Jesus has done. And so he wants to show his gratitude. And he wants to thank Jesus for this new life that he's been given, for this new opportunity at identity. And so he throws Jesus a party and invites all of his friends to be there. That makes sense. It stands up to reason. And so who are his friends? Who does a tax collector hang out with? Other tax collectors, man. Misery loves company, right? You hang out with other tax collectors. But then the text also says they were tax collectors and other guests. Wouldn't you like to know who the other guests were? Because tax collectors are hated and reviled. And so they at least get a mention. You got other guests. It's kind of interesting. So who are the other guests? The kind of people that would hang out with tax collectors. Think about that. The kind of people that would hang out with the kind of people that are hated by everybody. These are the social outcasts, the open sinners, those rejected by their community. That is the guest list for Jesus' party. So the room was full of people like that. And so here's the thing. If this were in our day, many of us, look here, I'm going to pull your toes in. Listen, many of us would feel very uncomfortable in a room like that. Our good Christian morals wouldn't know what to do in a room full of people like that. Probably our greatest fear in a moment of being in a room like that is that somebody might take a picture, post it on Facebook, and tag us in it. Where is the untag button? Right? But not for Jesus. Jesus is oddly comfortable in this room. He ate Levi's food. He drank his finest wine. He met with all of his friends. Yes, Jesus drank wine. That makes a lot of the Baptists in the room, we're very nervous right now in this moment. He might even dance a little bit too. Dear Lord, pray for him, right? But anyway, Jesus provided warmth. He provided friendship to people who had been rejected by society, especially rejected by those that were religious. You know, Jesus in this moment teaches us a lot about the character and nature of God, if you really think about it. Teaches us a lot. He teaches us the kind of people that are worth pursuing and giving our time to. Jesus, in this moment, teaches us the kind of people that God pursues, the kind of people that God gives his time to, the kind of people that are worth loving. That's what Jesus is teaching us about the character and nature of God. But this moment isn't without its challenges. I want you to see that. Thankfully, there were a group of religious leaders there to throw a wet blanket on the party. Thankfully. Now, Levi would not have invited the religious leaders. That would not have been on the short list for folks to come hang out. But they could have been there at the invitation of someone else, or simply because the size and scope of this party was so big that they wanted to be there to check things out, see what's going on. And they had the authority to do so. There could have been a multitude of reasons of why religious leaders were at that party on that afternoon. But what's important is to see how they leverage the opportunity they've been given. Look at verse 30 together. It says, but the Pharisees and their scribes, remember Pharisees are people who believe in the set of rules that protect the law. And so for them, obedience to rules and tradition is more important than obedience to the law, because if you don't break the rules and traditions, you'll never break the law, right? And then you got the scribes who are the experts in the law. And so you've got all these religious nerds together at this party. And it says they were complaining to his disciples. Why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners? Isn't it interesting that they're complaining to the disciples? They're not complaining to anybody else. And why do you think that is? Because they're complaining about everybody else. So who's there to complain to? Well, you think we've got these kind of more Orthodox, more traditional Jews in the mix. We don't have tax collectors and others. We've got these disciples who I think we can complain to these guys. But I want to press on something here this morning that might kind of open our eyes to something interesting. I think there are some important truths here that might help us clarify something helpful when investigating Jesus. A couple important things. Number one, this moment, the religious leaders, what they're doing, it actually serves as a gift. And I'll tell you why. I want you to follow, I want you to track with me on this, because I think this could be very helpful for us today. It solidifies that Jesus is as important as he claims to be. Listen, Jesus believed he had disciples, didn't he? He had at least 4. Jesus believed he had disciples. The fact that the religious leaders were complaining to his disciples confirms that this was widely accepted, especially by the religious leaders. By acknowledging he has disciples, what they're inadvertently doing is affirming the reality that he's a rabbi or a leader. That's what they're doing. So their complaining to the disciples actually serves to benefit us in this moment, because it reaffirms and it reassures us in our belief and trust in who Jesus is. Number 2 is that complaining to his disciples in Levi's home only serves to affirm that the information we know about the disciples is true. So what Luke writes is actually true. It affirms that. And I'll tell you why. There are 4 disciples up to this point. Now, don't miss this. There are 4 disciples up to this point. And what was their previous occupation? Anybody remember? Commercial fishermen, exactly. What do they sell? What do they export? What do they sell locally? What do they sell regionally? Fish. And where did they do this? At the port in Capernaum. This was a custom leaving the region that would have been taxed really well. And who would have taxed that custom? Who? Say it. Levi. The Pharisees and the scribes are no doubt trying to rile up the disciples. Can you believe this guy Jesus? Can you believe this fool? Who's he hanging out with? He's hanging out with the idiot that is taxing you into oblivion. This guy. And he's got all his friends here too. And what did he do? He taxed your fish, he taxed your workers, he taxed your career, he taxed your livelihood. The same tax collectors that stole money from you and from your families for years are all in one place together. And what's Jesus doing? Hanging out, having a drink with them? Are you serious? The details of the exchange are really important because it communicates the truths about Jesus and his ministry. If Jesus wasn't who he claimed to be, the religious leaders would be very uninterested in riling up the disciples, potentially against Jesus. So this actually serves as a good gift for us. Even how Jesus responds to the accusation, it brings about some affirmation for us. Look at verse 31 through 32. Then Jesus replied to them, "It is not those who are healthy who need a doctor, but those who are sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. So again, Jesus mentions the reality of sinners and his role in forgiving sinners by calling sinners to repentance. This is consistent with what Jesus said at the healing of the paralytic man, isn't it? Which is easier, to heal a man or to forgive him of his sins? So this is very consistent for us. And so these, look here, watch this. These consistencies, these affirmations, they help us have a greater trust in who Jesus is. Scripture is consistent. There are no contradictions. This is so big. These are really helpful details, but there's more happening here that I don't want us to miss this morning than just surface level apologetics. Something really cool here. You can see that Jesus doesn't give his disciples a chance to respond to the accusations, does he? No. Instead, he jumps in immediately and he responds on their behalf. He says, "It is not those who are healthy who need a doctor, but those who are sick." Verse 32, "I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance." His response is loaded with some really critical information. Number one is that Jesus acknowledges that the people he is with right now are not spiritually well. Get that? He acknowledges that they are sinners. Let me ask you this. Do you think it's possible that the people around them at this party would have heard that? I want you to imagine the tension in the room. Do you think they took offense? Sit down, eating a little bread here. And Jesus is like, "Man, it's not the healthy you need a doctor, it's the sick. And these guys are all sinners." And the guy takes a breath like, what did he just say? What did he just call me? So I want you to imagine the dynamics in the room. Look, Jesus doesn't push back and say tax collectors and sinners are just like us and they need to be accepted. He doesn't try to equal the playing field in some small way by saying, "What we need is tolerance and approval here, guys. You're really hurting your MO as religious leaders. You need to settle down and let their truth be their truth. Everybody chill." Jesus isn't doing that. Actually, just the opposite. Look here, watch this. In some small way, Jesus is actually, in the moment, he's actually agreeing with the religious leaders in the room. He's actually agreeing with them. He agrees that these people are sinners. The difference is that these people don't believe they're whole and perfect and righteous. They know something is wrong and missing in their lives. The religious leaders believe they were righteous and whole and believe nothing is missing from their life. They don't see a need for their sins to be forgiven. Therefore, they don't see a need for a Messiah. Jesus ate with these people. He gave them friendship and he built relationships, all the while knowing that they were sinners, and yet he still spoke the truth. Are you tracking with that reality right now? That's really big for us today. So what's our response to this? What do we do with this information? Well, we can be like the Pharisee or we can be like Levi. I don't really see too many other options in this text for application. Maybe you do. You see, I think there's two types of Pharisee today. I want you to track with me on this. I think we have religious Pharisee and I think we have cultural Pharisee. Religious Pharisee and cultural Pharisee. Let me explain this to you. Religious Pharisee like the rules. They like control. They like to have people conform and submit to their rules. They exist in every church, some more than others. It's an easy trap to fall into. It's one very difficult to get out of. Every single one of us in here has a tendency to be a little bit of a Pharisee inside of us. Every one of us has that tendency if we're not careful. And so being a Pharisee in the church is often associated with being all about the truth. The truth. And so we pound our fists, we make the rules, and you follow the rules. I've seen this in several churches, and I've seen the outcome of this type of religious living. You want to know what it is? Every time, look here, one word, death. Every time. The church and its future slowly slips into a relevancy coma, and then it dies. And there's a lot more that can be said about that than we have time for today. But the second type of Pharisee that I think exists today is a cultural Pharisee. This is where we're about to get real uncomfortable for just a moment. A cultural Pharisee is someone who believes there's no truth but my truth and your truth, and that grace should be applied to all matters. My truth matters and your truth matters. There is no absolute or universal truth, and that no matter what my truth says or what your truth says, what we need to have is grace. Look at me right here. I want you to look at me. Grace would never exist if it were not for truth. Truth would never exist if it were not for grace. They are absolutely dependent on one another. So therefore, my truth and your truth cannot exist in order for it to be what? True. It can't be. It's not logical. We want grace to be expressed through tolerance and acceptance, that all lifestyles and all individual choices should be honored without question. That's dangerous at best. And so both the religious and cultural Pharisee, look at me, are wrong. They're wrong. Both try to manipulate, both try to control a narrative, both try to have things their way and expect everyone else to get on board. And so which one of those do you want to be? I don't want to be either. Instead, I'd like to be like Levi. That's who I want to be. You see, Levi knew there was something wrong in him. And instead of trying to meet that reality with a false diatribe or belief system, he embraced it and had the humility to admit it. You see, that's what's lacking in our culture today. Humility. Everybody with a Wi-Fi connection and a keyboard is a warrior entitled to their opinion. Levi could have allowed his pride or his arrogance or that tiny Pharisee in him to tell Jesus to just keep on moving, bro. Keep on moving. But instead, when Jesus invited Levi to leave everything, he was willing to do so. Levi left his identity and he took on a new one. Levi left his truth and exchanged it for absolute truth. Levi surrendered his life so that by following Jesus, he might actually live. Do you see the difference? And so Levi experienced true freedom on that day. True freedom on that day. And the only way that he knew to respond was to throw Jesus a party. He could have just taken Jesus and the disciples out for lunch. You guys want to hit an Olive Garden afterwards? That's really good. It's falafel season. It's going to be great. But he didn't. Instead, he throws a party. And why does he throw a party? So that he can thank Jesus and he can introduce all of his old friends to Jesus and to the disciples, his new friends. The same dudes that he's been raking over the financial coals for the last 10 years. And now he's like, you guys want to play some basketball or something? You want to hang out? And these guys are like, yeah, I don't think so, bro. Give me a minute on this one. You know? This is his response. And so maybe Levi was hoping that some of his old friends would meet Jesus, and in doing so, their lives would be changed. Their lives would be surrendered, and their pride and their egos would be quieted. And so let me ask you, church, where are you today? If you're at this party today, where are you? Are you the religious leaders who are being Pharisee in the moment, complaining about everything? Thinking Jesus should do things your way and follow your rules? Are you the cultural Pharisee who's offended by Jesus' assessment of the crowd and thinks, no, hang on a second, pal. Who are you to tell me who I am? And so you think Jesus needs to follow your rules? Or are you Levi? Were you lost and now you're found? And the only thing you can do is be overwhelmed by the grace and the mercy that you've been shown in light of the truth of who you are and respond by giving your life. Jesus came to save sinners. The only way that can happen is to first acknowledge that you are one. You don't get all the benefits of salvation if you're not willing to first accept the reality of what you're being saved from. Don't let pride keep you from both truth and grace today. That is my fear, church, is that we are more content to be religious Pharisee and cultural Pharisee than we are to be the man who in the moment knew that he needed his life to change. and his humility answered the invitation. And so he left everything and followed Jesus. Who are you at the party today? I can't answer that for you, but the Holy Spirit needs to stir in you. The Lord doesn't bend to our way of thinking. That's really important today. I'm going to pray for you, and then we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about what's next as a church. Father, I just ask your blessing over our time. And Lord, I pray that you would continue to do a good work, that you would speak a powerful work in us as we wrestle with this reality of who we are. Are we rule makers and rule followers? And in doing so, we cut people out of our lives who are hurting, who are broken, and there's no place for them. No, Jesus, you showed us the kind of people that are worth pursuing and loving. And so we do pursue those that are broken, that are outside of our society, that are downcast, that are lonely, that are vulnerable. Jesus, we do pursue those people, but not at the sake of trying to affirm their lives, but rather to invite them to follow after you, that they might lose their life in hopes that they would actually find it. Jesus, don't let us be cultural Pharisee, where we think that the apex of human existence is my individual truth. Lord, forgive us for that. May we repent of that. And may we submit to the fact that you love us and made us and know us better. Or are we Levi, who's willing to set aside pride and arrogance for the hope of new life, to follow a great king? And I thank you for Levi that eventually became Matthew, who wrote the gospel, who ministered and changed a region by the power of the Holy Spirit. Oh, what our lives might actually look like. All the things we might do, Lord, if we would only submit to you. Do this work in us this week, Father. I pray now in Jesus' name, amen.